are listening to A Difference for One podcast, episode number 23.
I'm Michelle.
I'm Nicole.
I'm Charisse.
And I'm Cami.
We are the English sisters.
We come together to share life-changing methods of improvement through a variety of topics.
We hope that above all, these discussions will help you feel that Jesus Christ is making a difference for you, the one. And we also hope that our podcast will inspire you to find simple ways that you can make a difference for one.
Hey friends, this is Charisse speaking, and today Michelle and Nicole have joined me on this topic that I personally am obsessed with. And yes, obsessed is the right word. I love this. And we hope today that you, our audience, will learn something and therefore appreciate the unique things about yourself. Are you excited to hear what it is? We are going to talk about energy types and energy profiling. This is taught in depth by Carol Tuttle, whom I adore so much. And she teaches it through her books and her online resources, and she has attended seminars. And I will make sure to have links in the show notes so that you can go to her resources. I've actually been to a seminar where Carol Tuttle was the guest speaker, and I wish it lasted longer than a few hours. She taught me so much from her 6 best-selling books and from her online courses. And I learned that once I understood myself, I could focus on ways to live a healthier life, physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. And I could honestly talk about this subject all day long with anyone, as long as they're interested, because it has helped me to understand myself and others and why we are the way that we are and why we are different and why we are similar in some ways. So today we will only briefly touch the surface of what energy types are. So if you would like more information, then please click on the links in the show notes.
We'll be back after this quick break with a message from our sponsors. So now we're going to talk about why energy profiling. What's the point? Energy profiling is a tool to help you understand the different ways that people move in this world and why they are the way they are. What drives them, how they act, and their reasoning behind the different things that they say and do. And I've really liked Carol Tuttle's energy profiling system because it's simple and straightforward, and from what I've seen, it's accurate. However, like any tool or resource, if it benefits you, then you can use it to help you or for improvement. If you don't connect with it, then you can set it aside and not use it. Hopefully, though, after we talk about this today, you'll be interested to learn more and see if it helps you. That is, if it's something that's new to you. One way that I've seen it's helpful is sometimes when you're having interactions with people and you're not really jiving with them, you feel like, why don't they just do it this way? This is a good way to see the answer to that question, why they're doing things differently than you are, or the reason behind the things that they do. And it's going to help you get into their brain a little more and understand people a little bit better.
Yeah, so let's dive into what the 4 different types are. Everyone has all 4 of these energy types within them, but there's one type that they lead with dominantly. You know yourself the best, so choose which type you think fits you the most. If you're still unsure after listening to this podcast, then go to Carol Tuttle's website link in the show notes and study her energy profiling system. When I was new to this concept, I got one of Carol Tuttle's books called It's Just My Nature and wrote in my journal everything that I identified with to see which qualities I was most like in one of these 4 areas. There was one type that I couldn't find a single thing in there that sounded like me, and there was another that sounded so like me, it was as if someone was observing me and wrote down all of my qualities and struggles to come up with that one type. So everyone has a dominant type and a secondary type, and every person has a unique blend of the 4 types. So 2 people of the same type may still have very different personalities.
One thing that's kind of cool about these 4 types is, as 4 sisters, we're trying to figure out if it's a possibility that each of us might be each of the 4 different types. But this is Nicole speaking. Cami and I are still trying to figure out our types. And I think I can speak for both Cami and myself. It is very stressful because it's hard to self-evaluate. You need to be true to yourself, and you shouldn't feel like you have to change just because others see the world differently than you do. We are all a unique combination of the 4 types, which is what makes life so interesting. We would never want just 4 carbon copies running around the world. We need to recognize our individuality as well, but these types can also help us see perspectives that are different from our own and why people act the way they do that may be the complete opposite of how we act. The first type that we're going to discuss is type 1, obviously. Type 1 is called air energy. The movement is up, out, and random, and it's the highest movement. When I talk about a person who dominantly leads with type 1, I'm going to call them a type 1. So type 1s lead with their social tendencies. Their focus is all about fun and happiness. They'll do everything within their power to help others feel happy, and they are drawn to things that look fun, and they love being around other people. Their brain is very random, and they have so many ideas, and they think that all of their ideas are possible. When talking about positive attributes of type 1s, I want to point out that you can make anything a talent of yours. If you desire it, then you should go for it. It just may come a little more naturally to those who belong to the energy type where the trait comes naturally. For example, a trait that is known to be a type 1 trait will come more naturally to someone who is dominantly a type 1. And the same for all the other types. But that doesn't mean that you can't develop a trait from a type that's not your dominant type. And actually, we should emulate the Savior who has all 4 types in him. And we always want to be improving, but we're going to talk more about that later. In addition to the positive side, that goes for the negative as well. Any attributes that may be perceived as negative are not an excuse to stop working at improving. We all need to recognize our shortcomings and work at them instead of saying, well, that's just who I am. You don't have to have all of the traits that are listed under a type for you to be considered that type dominantly. Because like Michelle said, we all have a blend of all 4 of the types. Because everyone is different, some people may see your strengths as weaknesses. For example, right now I'm talking about type 1s. Type 1s are seen as airy and bubbly, energetic, and others who don't value that might try to squash it down, especially type 1s in a school environment, for example. A teacher might need to calm that child down so that he or she doesn't disturb the rest of the class. And so then that child might grow up thinking that their buoyance is a weakness when actually that's a type 1's strength. And so it's helpful to figure out what your type is so that you can see what your strengths are and utilize them as strengths, and stop telling yourself that they're weaknesses and that you need to change or get rid of them. This is a way to harness the things that are naturally helpful to you and that naturally come to you, and use your natural gifts and abilities to push you forward in life and help you be more successful. So I'm going to list some of the positive qualities of a type 1. Type 1s are optimistic. They look at the bright side of life. They have an upward lightness that lifts people around them. They love company. They love being around people. They are extroverts. They like to chit-chat and enjoy verbal interaction while doing mindless tasks or day-to-day tasks. They speak frankly and openly. For them, life is an open book. They agree with others easily. They seek a broad range of friendships. They are not selective or exclusive. They are adaptable and they can have their minds changed easily. They are multitaskers. They are spontaneous. They do last-minute planning. In social gatherings, they like to jump between conversations and interact with everyone there. They are naturally generous and carefree, especially with money. And that's an example of something that can be seen as a negative, but that means that they're very giving with their money. And so it's all about how you look at it. These are things that are typically perceived as negatives in type 1s. They are daydreamers, flighty, idealistic. They oftentimes are seen as those who do not follow through with what they say they'll do, or they're seen as being messy. They tend to start projects and not finish them or get bored with them. Before mastering a particular subject, their interest tends to relax because new impressions have captured their attention. They may look disorganized to others, but it's because they have their own way of organizing that makes sense to them. And actually, when I was in high school, my room always looked like a mess, but I knew where everything was, and I called it my organized mess. And I've learned to be a lot cleaner now, but that was just something I did.
That's so true. I remember those days.
They have a high level of belief that can cause them to appear gullible or naive. They often interrupt people and jump topics quickly because they process information faster. They speak without thinking first, and they are often late. For them, being close to on time feels like being on time. Like, wow, I was only 5 minutes late. They get excited about that. So just to remind you, this is Nicole speaking. Honestly, the types stress me out a little bit because it's hard for me to know which one I am. I don't know if I'm a dominant 1, secondary 2, or a dominant 2, secondary 1. And I haven't even read about type 4s, but I know I'm not a type 3. But some ways that I'm a type 1 is that I'm very optimistic, I'm easygoing, I'm very open-minded, I will listen to people and possibly change my opinion based on things they tell me. But there are things about a type 1 that I'm not. I wouldn't say that I'm a very frank person. It makes me uncomfortable to be blunt. Or I wouldn't say that I'm flighty, daydreaming, or chaotic. I'm not any of those things. I'm very methodical. And so I don't know if I am a type 1, but I definitely have type 1 characteristics. Not to toot my own horn, but my family thinks I'm hilarious, but my husband doesn't. So you can see it's very confusing for me.
You are funny. Don't let him tell you different. Okay, so I'm Charisse again. I am dominantly a type 2, so I think it just makes sense that I will tell you guys about the type 2 energy. Type 2s are the water energy. They lead with their emotional tendencies. Their movement through life is downward, gentle, and flowing. They have a medium to medium low movement. Their focus is all about comfort, comfortable environment, comfortable conversation, comfortable clothing, even comfort food. They will do everything in their power to help others and themselves feel comfortable. They are drawn to things that look muted or soft, and they love curvy shapes like the letter S. Their brain is like a train of thought. Everything is connected to everything else, and they love the details in those connections. Some of the positive attributes of a type 2 is that they are calm, careful, cautious, cuddly, easygoing, relaxed, reserved, subdued, tender-hearted, comfortable. We already mentioned that one. Clean, compassionate, concerned, gentle. They have a dry humor. Almost every sarcastic person I've met has been a dominant type 2. Almost. They are naturally empathetic, intuitive, meditative, methodical, modest, muted, peaceful, polite, and quaint. They are kind and patient, allowing life to flow at its natural pace. They connect with people, ideas, places, businesses, and happenings. They're all about the connections and how things make sense. They are subtle, and their strength is the quiet determination that they bring. They see another's point of view and they understand where they're coming from, or they try to understand. They ask why a lot. And also a lot of engineers I know have been dominant type 2s because they love to know why. They accomplish many things in a calm, quiet, and subtle way. Some of the negative attributes of a type 2 are that they can be called a crybaby or overly sensitive, shy, slow, timid, or whiny. They may get caught up in all the details, finding it difficult to make a decision about something. They may not be able to stand their ground because they're too soft, nice, or quiet. They may be so concerned about the feelings of others that they can't even discern their own feelings. One of the things that I thought about when I was preparing for this podcast was that as a type 2, when I fall asleep at night, I actually like to think about one thing, which makes me think about something else, which makes me think about something else, which makes me think about something else. And I think it's so fun to go back through my train of thought and figure out what I was thinking about first and then follow the train and how I got to the end. I just think it's so much fun, even though I told this to one of my family members on my husband's side about this, and they said, that sounds so tiring.
Okay, so type 3. This is Michelle, and I identify with type 3s the most. This is considered the fire energy. They lead with their physical tendencies. Their movement is swift, dynamic, and irregular, medium to medium high movement. Their focus is all about productivity. They will do everything within their power to get the results they want. They are drawn to things that are textured, daring, and rich in color or flavor. They love different angles and structure too. Their brain focuses on the reasoning behind things, and they often say, get to the point. Where's the story going? They will follow through with their own motivation and reason, and they won't let opinions from others get in their way. They have a high level of confidence. They're active, sure, purposeful, extroverted, practical, resourceful, taking action. Results are a priority. Action that creates results and change are so important to them. They are not motivated to impress others, but that's a natural outcome due to their dynamic energy and how much they get done. When their mind is set on something, they think, do whatever it takes, burn the candle at both ends. They get really into something, do it wholeheartedly, burn out, and move on to something else. They have a capacity to push several things along at once and make sure that they all get done. Completing tasks on their list and feeling accomplished as they check them off is really important to them. They even write things on their list that they've already done just to be able to cross them off and feel accomplished. They get rid of things that they don't have a use for anymore. They are also competitive, very sporty types. And if someone is down, they think of something to help change the person or fix the problem right away if they can. If someone tells them they can't do something, they think, oh yeah, watch me. And I have an example of this. Before I had kids, I worked in an orthodontic office, and my coworker said that I wouldn't be able to pass my certification test the first time. And that gave me the motivation and determination that I needed to prove to them that I could do it the first time. And nobody was going to tell me that I can't do something or that I'm not capable of something. And I did pass that certification the first time, and I felt so accomplished from being able to do that. So type 3s can move from one task to the next easily because it all has a purpose and a flow for them. They don't like to read instructions, which is true. I'd rather do anything than read instructions. They value honest communication, credibility, and realism. They are good at delegating if they know that the person they're delegating to will bring desired results. They like talking about their accomplishments and results readily. So others may see this as bragging, and it actually shocks a type 3 because they aren't motivated by impressing people, but they want to bring results to everyone. If this worked for me, it must work for you. And if you try it, then you'll get results and you'll feel accomplished like I feel accomplished. And that is me to a T as well. I want to share everything that I've experienced and learned and all of the results I've gotten, not to impress you, but to see if this might work for you too. If they journal, they bullet journal.
That's because they have to be very efficient and to the point.
Exactly. And they are eager to work things out with their loved ones. They express a great deal of love for the select people they form deep relationships with. They have the confidence to interact with anyone, be friendly, talkative, and they have no problem starting a conversation with a complete stranger. They are reliable. They are good with money and have a strong focus on it. And the more money they make, the more results they're getting in their minds. They walk with determination and swift steps. They are practical and they leave an impression. They're natural leaders, and others often turn to them to take the lead.
Which is definitely true in our dynamic of 4 sisters. But you're also the oldest.
I'm also the oldest. So some negative things, they have a tendency of being late because they try to cram too much in before they need to go somewhere. They're not realistic about what can be finished in the allotted time, and they'll try to do it all anyway, which is so me. I have no idea how much time it takes to do a particular task, and so I can definitely get these 5 tasks done before we need to go. They are judged as too much to handle or overconfident. They don't like to be told to relax and calm down. Just let them take the action they want to take on whatever they're passionate about and let them be who they are. Sometimes they can be seen as pushy, overbearing, or nosy. For me, it's often hard to stop and play with the kids or relax with my husband because I'm always thinking of the next things that I need to get done. I really have to focus and talk myself into the importance of playing and spending time with my children and say this is a worthy task as well, and try to put my to-do list aside. To-do lists are so important to me. I live by to-do lists and checking things off so I feel accomplished. And yesterday I was thinking, tomorrow I'm just going to have like 2 things on my to-do list and let myself relax and calm down and not worry about checking a bunch of things off. And then, of course, this morning I wrote out 10 things on my to-do list anyway. I just can't not do that.
Can't help it.
I can't help it. But I did play outside with my kids and I swung them on the swings for like half an hour and we had a great time outside. So I feel accomplished in that too, to be able to set those things aside and actually play with my kids. So for me, an ideal night, like by myself, is if my husband were to take the kids and give me a break and take them out for a few hours so I can get some things done that I've been wanting to accomplish, things that I haven't been able to cross off that to-do list and just get a bunch of them done. And that happened last Friday night. I asked him if he could take the kids out for a while, and he took them to his brother's house, and it was awesome. I worked on a project, cleaned out my closet, got some Chinese takeout, and did all that while I was watching a movie because I'm a multitasker, and every minute better count and be enjoyable to me in a task-driven way. I just want to get things done, and that is a type 3.
So this is Sharice again, and I'm going to talk about the type 4 energy because type 4 is my secondary type. Type 4s are the earth energy. They lead with their intellectual tendencies. Their movement is constant and steady. They have little to no movement. Their focus is on improvement and perfection. They will do everything within their power to make sure that things look or function better than it did before. They are drawn to things that are straightforward, parallel, exact, or still. Their brain is very black and white. It is either right or wrong, up or down, this way or that. There is no gray area to their way of thinking. They are bold and grounded on their opinions as well. The positive attributes of a type 4 is that they are articulate, bold, clear, concise, loyal, literal. They say literally a lot. They are very respectful. Respect is a huge thing for type 4s. They are efficient, logical, mature, even at a very little age. I have a nephew, when he was a baby, he looked like an old man, like with a wrinkly brow and everything. And he was just a little baby. And he has definitely got that type 4 tendency in him.
That's so funny.
Type 4s are thorough, polite, proper, reflective, responsible, still, structured, and well-mannered. They have laser-like mental focus. They are stable and consistent. They follow and they obey rules easily if they trust the source from which the rules come from. They have a keen eye for seeing things that need to be perfected or improved. They are contemplative and they seek more knowledge and wisdom naturally. They are an anchor to others. They're very grounding. They are captivating because they have an air of sophistication. They stay on track until they finish a task. These guys are the finishers. If you want something finished, you give it to a type 4. And this, I'm grateful that my husband and I are both secondary type 4 because we finish our tasks. We don't just leave them undone. And I'm very, very grateful for that. So some of the negative attributes of a type 4 is that they can be bossy, condescending, critical, judgmental. They can be a loner. They do like to be alone. Opinionated or rebellious. They could be cold or distant because they are content to just live in their own world. They could be authoritative. They can even get stuck in perfecting things that brings their forward movement to a standstill. So I mentioned that respect is a huge thing for type 4s. I remember when I was in grade school, I had a teacher who would say in the classroom, "Don't say shut up in my classroom." And then not 5-10 minutes later, they would then say, "Shut up" really loud because the noise in the classroom got really, really loud. And I didn't know that I did this at that age, but subconsciously, like looking back, I see why I did this. So I lost respect for that teacher and I actually stopped caring. They read a book to us and I didn't listen to a single word of that chapter book. And I answered all the questions like I was supposed to, but I had no idea how to answer them. And I failed that year in grade school because I was just done with that teacher. And I failed whatever classes I was taught by that teacher. And I didn't realize that I did that. I just thought that I didn't care. And I had never done that ever since that point in time in my life. But I think it's interesting that I lost respect for that teacher, therefore felt no longer the need to listen to them, which is kind of sad because I really enjoy school. It has to do with respect because type 4s are all about respect and they will be loyal to you 110% if they trust you. But once they lose their trust, they're gone because it's the black and white mentality. And, you know, if they can figure this out and not think of it as like a subconscious thing, you know, in retrospect type of a thing, the sooner they figure this out, the sooner they fix the problem and they can perfect how they do something the next time. So, for example, I obviously didn't know that I did that at that age, but I do remember loving books because I read a whole book to myself and I sat in this little corner that was kind of hidden behind the file cabinets of the classroom. And I loved that book and I devoured that book. Whereas the book that the teacher was reading, I didn't remember. And a movie came out about it and I was like, oh, this is what we read. Interesting. I'm kind of embarrassed to admit it, but it's true. Like, that's just what happened. So moving along, just a fun little ditty about the 4 types. If you were to look into a bedroom of one of the different types, specifically when they're in their youth or teenage years, a type 1's bedroom is going to be messy. But in their brain, everything is right where it needs to be because they need to see all of the things out and about to know where they are. So I know somebody who prefers to have all the ingredients out before they cook a meal so they can see what they have available to them. And to me, in my brain, that looks messy, but to them, they've got it under control.
My bedroom when I was in my youth was messy with piles, so still confused.
That makes sense because the type 2's bedroom is piles and everything makes sense to type 2 in their piles. Like I had a pile of stuffed animals and a pile of clothes and a pile of papers, and my piles did not touch other piles and they stayed in their areas. And even if my bedroom didn't look perfect, I got really angry if somebody messed with my piles. But this can get over the top for some, and their piles could turn into hoarding because they just like to have all the stuff and they're emotionally connected to all of those things and they know where everything is in those piles. Or it could go the other way where when they're cleaning and organizing, they first put things into piles and then put them away. Okay, so moving on to a type 3's bedroom. Their bedroom is covered with awards, medals, ribbons, certificates, anything that shows the results of their accomplishments. They love to see their awards displayed.
That's my type 3 daughter.
Yeah, you could go into a room after we tell you about this and be like, whoa, this kid is a type 1. Or, whoa, this kid is a type 4. So a type 4's bedroom is perfect. And that means perfect in whatever way looks perfect to them. So it may not be spotless. That may not be perfect to them. Their brain will tell them that this room needs to be perfect and it will be perfect for them. So I remember having a conversation with somebody and they said, this room is a mess. And the other person that it was their room, they said, oh no, this is perfect. This is exactly the way that I want it. So just be very careful when you address the types because it could be one way or another and you may not be able to understand, but the word perfect is still in there. So another fun thing is you can actually see examples of the 4 different energy types in nature. And this is so much fun to think about and analyze and look at for me because I love all forms of nature. I live in an area where I do get all 4 seasons. So let's start with type 1. A tree, for example, would be the aspen tree. An aspen tree has shallow roots. They grow really, really tall if other trees are nearby, and their leaves at the top are shaped like a circle. And if you've seen an aspen tree in the wind, their leaves look like shiny glitter, and their bark is really bright white color. And type 1s are the, bright, fun, uplifting type of a thing. So it makes sense that their bark would be that bright color, that white color. And I also notice with aspen trees that their leaves are only at the top if they have a ton of trees around them. I live in an area in a neighborhood that has tons of aspen trees. And if you see them in a group, they will only have the leaves where the sun touches them. Another type 1 in nature would be a hummingbird, very fast moving, a rabbit because they bounce, and the skyline would be dawn or early morning, and the season would be spring season. Type 2, the tree would be a willow tree because their roots are really, really deep and they're in search for water. Their branches above blow gently in the wind, but the trunk stays stationary, but they're very subtle in their movement. The leaves and the branches are also like this really beautiful S shape. Type 2 bird would be the dove bird because they're very muted in colors and even their sound is a very soft, subtle sound. Another thing would be an elephant because they have very deep and S shape. A time of day would be the dusk or early evening and then the summer season. Type 3, the tree would be a maple. They have a really deep bark and very rugged texture to the bark. They have pointed leaves, rich and dynamic leaf color, constantly changing. This type of tree fulfills a purpose in creating their maple sap. which we turn into maple syrup. And so type 3s are all about being functional. Another type 3 would be a hawk or a cheetah because they're very determined and goal oriented. The time of day would be the midday because that's when they can be the most productive. And then their season is the fall season because it's very rich in color. Type 4 in nature, the tree would be a fir tree or a pine tree because they have the parallel lines. And they are green all year round. They are never changed. Their needles or leaves, they're straight lines. Another type 4 would be a swan or any animal that's black and white, like a penguin or a panda, a polar bear, panther. The time of day is actually nighttime, and the most beautiful scene for type 4 to look at is the middle of the night with a full moon, dark sky, and snow, freshly fallen snow on the ground with those pine trees reflecting in the moonlight. And then obviously the winter season because that snow, that dark sky with the white snow, that black and white contrast. Type 4s love it. So I love to use this energy profiling system when I am with my family or friends so that I know how to respond if they need my help with something. I try to act in ways that are true to their nature or energy type while still trying to be honest with my own. So for example, my daughter's dominant energy type is type 4 and my dominant energy type is type 2. And when we have somewhere to go, I tell her beforehand because type 4s don't really like surprises. They don't like just stopping something. They don't like not being able to finish a task. With a type 4, I have to kind of give them a warning and say, okay, in 5 minutes, we're going to be leaving instead of interrupting their task so that she knows what to expect. If I calmly prepare her beforehand, there's much less of a struggle when we get out the door. And when that same daughter comes to me with a problem, she tells me with a very direct, bold tone in her voice because she has her mind made up. And by acknowledging that, or honoring, as Carol Tuttle calls it, her movement and how she approaches the situation, I can help her to feel validated. And then by using my own type, I can allow my own movement to then guide how the situation could be resolved because I am obviously the parent. As I have come to this conclusion over time and by reading Carol Tuttle's books, I've realized that I have more peace in my home when I honor the individual natures of my family members. And I think it really helps us to feel included when our different voices are heard in my home.
So this is Michelle speaking. I try not to type everyone I meet because I often don't know them well enough and I may get it wrong. But there are some people that are so strong in their types that it's obvious. I have a friend who is very much a type 2, and it's so obvious that she couldn't be anything else dominant. But for the most part, I try to let them just be themselves. And I try to remember what I know about their type. For someone that I know they're a dominant type 2 or type 4, I try not to come on so strong to them. So it's helpful to know what my husband and kids are in particular. It took me a long time to figure out what my husband's type is. He's not interested in this profiling process, and that's okay. But remembering his type helps me in our relationship with each other so that I can validate him and honor his type. So with my kids, it's also helpful. One of my daughters is a type 4, and it's important that I don't question her too much. She's a private person, and I want her to be able to share things on her terms. And I have to be careful with my type 3 because we are so much alike and we tend to butt heads. I have 2 type 1 kids, and they need learning to be fun and engaging, or they don't want to do it. And especially with COVID forcing us all to be teaching at home, it's important that I come up with fun, creative ways for them to learn.
I've seen that as well with my son that I think is a type 1. He tells me, I only want to do school if it's fun.
Mm-hmm. And then my youngest is a 3, and she feels suffocated if she gets too many snuggles, and she's very independent and strong-willed, but in a good way. And I think as long as they're taught to channel those attributes in positive ways, they can have a positive experience in their life with the things that come naturally to them. A great book of Carol Tuttle's that relates to these types and is often where people start learning about her energy types is the book called The Child Whisperer, because it helps the parent deal with the differences in the parents and the child's energy types and how they can work together to validate each other.
So if you're still listening and still interested in the types, I think it's really important to live true to your dominant energy type. There are some people that I've known in my life that have been difficult for me to be around. And I would study and search and try to figure out how their natural movements played into their life and hopefully try to figure out what energy type they were, just, for my sake and my sanity, and not necessarily point it out to them in any way. And in the past, my mom has even said to me, "Oh, is that the energy type I don't like?" And I would constantly explain to her that there aren't any types that she does or doesn't like, but that the qualities that accompany the different types of energy are matter-of-factly this way or that way. They aren't good or bad. And then I explained to her that there are some people who don't act true to their type and may have experienced trauma in their past where being true to who they were wasn't honored. And so it was really difficult for them to figure out who they were. But not everybody notices this. It's just in my experience that I've noticed because I'm sensitive to the feelings of others, and I can kind of just tell when something is off. And the more I get to know a person, the more I realize that my theory is true, because they would tell me about their childhood and how they would try to be different so they'd be accepted by their friends or family members. And it's really common for people to do this during many different periods of their life. It's not just in childhood. I've learned that when a child doesn't feel safe to be authentic with themselves, they may grow up trying to be something that they're not. For example, I remember when I was growing up and I noticed that all of my friends enjoyed being around my sister because she was naturally funny, upbeat, and lighthearted. And the same with my mother. When my mom would join me as a chaperone for my school field trips, I suddenly had all of the friends because everybody wanted to be around my mom. She has the same natural tendency as my sister to be fun-loving and outgoing, and I just wasn't that way. And so when I was little, I decided very young that I would try to be funny and try to tell jokes and try to be like my mom and be like my sister. But whenever I tried to do that, like being funny or silly, I would not get the reaction that I desired. People would just look at me like I was weird or crazy. And after a while, I just stopped trying to be funny. Years later, I read a few of Carol Tuttle's books, and I cried when I read the sections that explain the type 2 energy, because I finally felt like someone understood me, and I finally felt free to understand myself and not try to be something that I wasn't. As I read through the other sections, I noticed that the energy I tried to be when I was little was a type 1 energy, but that wasn't my nature. It wasn't how I moved in my life. It was how my mom and my sister moved in life. I realized that type 1s are really good at helping others to be happy, and they love to see the joy and life in a room, no matter how they feel on the inside. And I learned that type 2s are more subtle, muted, and soft. They prefer to make emotional connections with others. Looking back, my favorite moments in life were when people were bonding after a really hard trial and they were crying together, singing Kumbaya. Those are my favorite memories. Over the years, I have embraced my natural gifts while allowing others, or at least trying to allow others, to realize their own, and then teaching them how to embrace their own. My absolute favorite group to teach this to is teenagers, specifically teenage girls. They're way more fun. Boys are just really quiet and like, how does she know this about me? Because teenage girls, their reactions are just really obvious, and they're like, how did you know? And they think that I understand so much about them, when in reality, I just understand their energy types. So a really fun thing that our sister Cami figured out, she talked to us about this, is that the 4 energy types actually has to do with the thought cycle. In the thought cycle, we have thought, emotion, effort, and outcome. Well, if you think about the energy types, we have thought, type 1, emotion, type 2, effort, type 3, outcome, type 4. And I just love that it goes right along with all of this. So as you are learning about the thought cycle that we talked about in episode 2, you can apply what you've learned in this new light or understanding as we've taught you about the energy types from Carol Tuttle. And I just think it's so fascinating.
We wanted to end with a little bit of a spiritual thought, and yes, we do have a way to apply this to the scriptures. Our Savior Jesus Christ is perfectly all 4 energy types. He's not 25% each type, he's 100% each type. And there are examples in the scriptures when he leads with each of the 4 types. A type 1 example is Mark 10:27, where he teaches his disciples that with God all things are possible. This showed that he had simple faith and that he was very optimistic. A type 2 example in the scriptures is John chapter 4, verses 6 through 26. This is where Jesus spoke with the Samaritan woman at Jacob's well, one-on-one, and he helped her understand that he is the way to eternal life. This is a time when he made an emotional connection one-on-one with someone. A type 3 example is in John chapter 2, verses 13 through 17. This is when Jesus cleansed the temple in Jerusalem from the money changers and those who were disrespecting his Father's house. So he produced quick results. A type 4 example is in Matthew chapter 3, verses 13 through 17. This is when Jesus was baptized to fulfill all righteousness and to be an example of the correct way. This was a simple and still example of reaching perfection, doing the right thing, and he wasn't big or showy about it. And the last one I wanted to mention is a scripture that talks about all 4 of them, which is Luke chapter 2, verse 52. And it says, "And Jesus increased in wisdom and stature and in favor with God and man." And if I'm not wrong, wisdom is type 4, stature is type 3, favor with God is type 2, and favor with man is type 1. And this is a side note, but I think it's really interesting that in our faith, the leaders of the church are encouraging the youth to improve in all of these 4 areas and make goals in each of these 4 areas. I think that that is really great. And I've been trying to improve in these 4 areas because of learning these 4 energy types and because of what the youth are being encouraged to do right now.
Thank you, Nicole. I love that. So by honoring my truth, I have learned that it is easier for me to have less resistance to certain things that I'm uncomfortable with. There's that word again, comfort with the type 2, or things that are opposite of my natural movement. My hope is to one day be more like Christ, who is so good at being all 4 of the types. So what areas am I lacking in? In what ways am I not being true to myself? How can I be more honest with myself and others? And these are just things that I think about as I try to improve myself. Thank you so much for joining us today and learning about energy movements and types. I really hope that this information will inspire you to learn more about yourself and love yourself for who you are and do the same for others easily. Talk to you next time. Bye.
If you like this podcast, don't forget to subscribe and leave a review. If it resonates with you, the greatest compliment you could give is to share it with a friend who might benefit from it as well. Check out A Difference for One on Instagram for additional content. And if you have any questions, comments, a topic you'd like to hear about, or if you'd be interested in a free mini coaching session, send an email to adifferenceforone@gmail.com.